My name is Lilo Armandi, and my ego is a liar. And guess what? Yours is too. I'm a combat veteran, mother, and recovering high performer. This is a show about the lies we tell ourselves, how they shape us, how they break us, and what it takes to finally let them go. Let's uncover our lies to seek the truths underneath. Because before there's clarity, there's chaos. Let's navigate it together. So don your oxygen mask and take a deep breath. Welcome to Lies My Ego Told Me. Welcome back, liars and truth seekers, to another episode of Lies My Ego Told Me. I'm Lilo, and today's guest is someone who discovered that the scariest diagnosis wasn't the life-changing illness that she fought through. It was the realization that maybe it's okay to give up. Kelly Poquiz-Burke is an executive coach and CEO of Career Slay. She's a former brand marketing executive who ascended up the corporate ladder, managing multi-billion-dollar portfolios for companies like Doritos, Chick-fil-A, and Avocados From Mexico. She's won 40 Under 40 awards, delivered Super Bowl campaigns, worked with celebrities, and achieved everything she set out to accomplish. But all success comes at a cost. And it was the moment her 3-year-old daughter answered an innocent question that changed everything. How can I be a better mommy? The answer shook Kelly to her core, shifting her perspective and unraveling the lie she struggled with for so long. Kelly, I am so happy to have you here today. Thank you for sharing your story.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me on the podcast, Lilo. That was an incredible introduction. Can you please send that to my mother?
Yes, and she will be proud. And if nobody's told you today, I'm very proud of you.
Thank you.
So Kelly, you're obviously an overachiever. You excelled in school as a kid. You went to Notre Dame, landed your dream job in marketing right out of the gate, and then you climbed the ladder, got your MBA, and then continued on this ambitious rocket ship of a career. And you seem to have a pretty strong record of performance, but at some point you realized that the dream that you were chasing was actually the thing that was destroying you. So Kelly, what was the lie that your ego was telling you? The one that pushed you to your greatest heights, but also just pushed you to the ragged edge?
Yeah, so my lie was quitting is failing. And let me explain. So I grew up in a Filipino household. My parents immigrated from the Philippines back in the 80s. My mom was a nurse. My dad was a janitor. And they really built this whole new life for us in a country that they were foreign to, where the food was different, the language was different. And so for them, they instilled in us, it was me and my 2 sisters. I have an older sister and a younger sister. They instilled in us just this desire for striving for excellence, for perfection, for making sure that everything that we did was at this caliber of excellence so that we would unlock more prosperity and economic mobility moving forward. And so as a kid, I always had to do everything to the highest standard. And so quitting was never something that was on the table in my mind, because when I think about my parents' story, quitting wasn't an option. Quitting for them was like lack of survival. And so it was really just this hard work, determination, and grit that was instilled in us from a very early age.
And like you said, I don't think a lot of people would even consider that to be a lie, because it's almost a credo that people live by, like never, ever giving up. And that's what your parents had to do. And obviously working hard is something that you inherited from your family and your parents instilled in you. And for so many first generation kids, there's this unspoken expectation that you are going to achieve what your parents only dreamed of. And that kind of pressure starts so young. So when did it actually start for you? What did that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I can remember from my earliest days, my sister and I were always in the same activity. So my mom put us in piano. I think I started at the age of 4. She started at 5, so I had like an upper edge on her a whole year. But we started in piano, and it was kind of the activity that my parents were, you have to stay in piano, you have to do this practice every single day and get to this caliber of excellence. And so I remember I was like really, really, really good at piano, and I played until the 7th grade. And there was one point where I really didn't love it. Like, my teacher was always making us play classical pieces, and I was more of the like, I love the Backstreet Boys and I want to play pop or whatever. And it just wasn't, it wasn't a good fit for me. And so I worked up the courage to tell my mom, like when I think I was 12 years old, I was like, I hate piano and I'm going to quit. And I'm never, ever going to let my daughter play piano. And she was like, okay, like, whoa, these really strong feelings. But that was the first time I ever really found the courage to carve out my own path, because my sister went on to continue playing piano. And now she, to this day, is a very avid piano player, and she's really good. I could have been at that level, except I was like, no, this is not me. I quit. I'm not going to do this. Though now looking back, I kind of wish I had stuck it out.
But it's such an interesting phenomenon with piano, because you're definitely not alone, because it's indicative of the economic upward mobility that you alluded to earlier. When society's middle classes rise, the exposure to cultural markers also increases. So things like piano lessons, it ends up being a reflection on your parents' success that they're able to provide lessons for you. And we saw it in the 1900s with the bourgeoisie. We saw it in mid-century America, and now most recently in China. It's just this symbol of arrival and proof of your parents' sacrifices. It had to have stung your mom a little bit, I'm assuming, because she really did love that you played piano.
Absolutely. So it was this thing where we would go to parties, and, in the Filipino culture, you're going to a party like every week. You're always gathering with friends and family in your community. And she would make us, if there was a piano in any house, like we could probably even not know the family very well, and she would make us play this piano, and she'd be like showcasing her two daughters who are really good at piano, and we even knew like songs where my sister and I are both playing, and I'm playing like the lower parts and she's playing the upper parts. And then on top of that, like even beyond piano, she always just encouraged us to perform. So we would learn line dances like Achy Breaky Heart and, the Electric Slide and Macarena, and we would perform for people like at our house or in front of, just any sort of gathering. And so I think that really instilled in me just this desire to perform, to impress people, to delight people. And I think that also played into just the high achievement aspect, especially as I got into corporate.
You described the feeling of quitting as kind of this sense of rebellion and liberation, but something shifted in you after that, didn't it? Because that need to perform never really left you. So what was filling the void after you quit piano?
I grew up in a youth group in a church community. And so also what's really common about the Filipino culture is that there's this joke that like every Filipino knows how to sing or play an instrument, and that's true. So I like very much went into learning a bunch of instruments. I learned the guitar, the bass, the drums. I think I learned the flute. But what was really my best instrument was singing, so my voice. I ended up going into choir and really just loved this element of like theater and performance. And that kind of plays into the direction that my career ended up going into now as a keynote speaker. So I loved being able to express myself and to delight audiences. And for that short period of time, like have this little bit of like escapism and joy where all eyes were on me, and I was the person to deliver that emotional response for them.
I don't think you could help being this child that excelled. I think it's just kind of innate in you. But when you got to Notre Dame eventually, you had a reality check, because now you're amongst a whole bunch of other people who were also high achievers, which is great for motivation. But it's also this massive, blow to your ego, because you're used to being the best and now everybody else is. So you're amongst all these high caliber performers. And you said that you had a clear path in mind when you were going there. But most plans don't survive first contact. So tell me about your time as an undergrad.
Yeah, so let me tell you how I got to Notre Dame in the first place. I had no idea where I wanted to go to school, but I always had this desire to build. And that came from playing with Legos, funny enough. So I knew I wanted to build things, and I knew that architects build things. And I had this idea that like, oh, architects just play with Legos all day. Like, that's an awesome career. Let me go do that. And so my freshman year of high school, our teacher asked us to write down, where do you want to go to college? And I turned to my best friend and I say, where do you want to go to college? And she goes, Notre Dame. And I'm like, all right, I'll write that down. And so I didn't know anything about Notre Dame. I looked them up. They had a great architecture program. What I liked about their program in architecture was that it was 5 years. You got to spend 1 year in Rome. And so that was like just a dream for me. And as I got through my first year, I realized just the level of intensity that it required. Like we were doing a bunch of all-nighters, drafting, drawing, and it just wasn't what I expected, because I wanted to play with Legos and build things. And so I remember having that conversation with my mom after my first year, and it was so scary because I wanted to quit and I wanted to change majors. I knew immediately that this wasn't the right fit for me. I was exhausted because we were continuously pulling all-nighters. And so I remember having that conversation with her and being just so scared as to like, what was she going to say? Is she going to judge me? Am I going to be a disappointment to her? But I mustered up the courage to tell her that, hey, I'm not happy and I want to find another major. And I think this other major called industrial design is going to be a better fit for what I had expected to be doing. And she was like, okay, I don't know what that is. So maybe you get a backup major, marketing. And so I was like, okay, that's a good compromise. I'll just do 2 majors, no problem. And so then I had to essentially squeeze in a double major into 3 years of college. And I wanted to study abroad, which is where I met my husband. So it was just a really intense, remainder of my college career. But ultimately it ended up working out.
That must have been not only stressful for you to quit, but the consideration of the finance.
Absolutely. My mom had actually lost her job when I was in college. So they weren't really supporting me very much financially. Of course, they, send me their love and support that way. But really, college was all on me. And so I knew that coming out of college, I was going to have a mountain of student loans to pay off. So that was definitely a consideration. And when I graduated, I had about $80,000 of student loans that I was graduating with and ended up going into advertising after college. And so a couple weeks before graduation, I was debating whether or not to take this job. It was going to pay me $38,000 a year as an assistant account executive. And I had $80,000 of student loan debt. And I call my mom in a complete panic. And she is like, Kelly, when I was your age, I came to the US with a suitcase and $25 in my pocket. You're going to be okay. You're going to figure this out. And so knowing the context of the hurdles that my parents overcame, it really gave me this extra motivation and drive to make the most out of my career and to really excel in anything that I did. My older sister is a doctor. My younger sister studied fashion. And so we all kind of carved out our different paths. But for me, the most important thing was my parents sacrificed so much for me to get here. I'm going to show the world what I can do.
And that first job was your dream job, right? So you go into advertising and obviously was in a really inexpensive place. That $38,000 was going to go really far, which was in Chicago. But you hit your stride, right? And you really are growing as a young professional. But this is when you have your first serious medical event. Can you tell us what happened?
Yeah. So in my early 20s, I was diagnosed with hip dysplasia. And what that meant was that the ball never grew into the socket completely. So over time, the wear and tear of that hip just became increasingly painful. So to the point where I couldn't even walk around a mall. Like, who walks around a mall anyways? But so in my early 20s, I had to have these two major hip surgeries, and I knew that that was going to change the trajectory of my career, and I knew I was going to need support because I was living alone in Chicago. And I didn't have any of that familial support with me. I decided to make a move back to Texas so that I could have these two hip surgeries. And luckily, my parents were so supportive. And, I was able to find a job at another agency down here in Texas.
So you recover. And then, like you said, you get another job. And again, as Kelly does, you start excelling again. And while being a high performer in a field can be extremely validating, it can also become its own prison, can it? So what is happening to you in terms of purpose and fulfillment at this point in your career?
So at this point in my career, I've worked on a bunch of clients and have gotten to really experience the world of advertising. And I realize and recognize that I am going to hit some sort of growth limit because I wanted to be a designer originally after coming back down to Dallas. I always had this creative spirit. I wanted to see if I could go back and be, a creative, and ultimately ended up working at a design firm on the account management side. So I was a brand manager. But I recognized that being in a creative environment and not being a creative, there was always going to be a growth cap. So I decided to go back and get my MBA. And, going back to my roots of my undergrad, where I had that marketing background, I wanted to explore how could I gain more business acumen by learning more about business. And so I worked full time, so Monday through Friday, and then on Friday evenings and Saturdays, and sometimes even Sundays, I would go to school, and I ended up graduating along in 2 years with the full-time program.
A lot of people would see that and think that is, wow, what incredible motivation. But I think this is kind of setting you up for some pretty bad habits when it comes to my favorite word, work-life balance.
Oh, yeah.
Because once you get your MBA, you're thrust into these new strategic and leadership roles, and you become an account manager for Frito-Lay, which is a huge company, and specifically for their nuts, seeds, cookies, crackers, and small chips, which is my favorite job description. And the expectation for your performance at this point is just huge. And literally, as soon as you're onboarded, you start taking on massive responsibility. So what did managing an account for seeds teach you about the pressure that you are really great at putting on yourself?
Yeah. So I was on the team that was in charge of, as you said, like on the go consumption items. So like if you're going into a convenience store, then it's like, what is on the rack that you can easily pick and like eat on the go? And so it happened to be the brand manager for seeds. And so I think it was my first 2 weeks on the job. I am in a task force meeting, which means there's a bunch of cross-functional leaders in a room, and we're all talking about what needs to happen in order to get, production and all of that stuff out the door. And I get asked this question like, hey, we need a forecast for the number of seeds that need to be planted in the ground so that we can meet demand in 2020. And I'm like, you need that from who? And they're like, from marketing. And I'm like, from me? It's going to be wrong, but okay. And so I spin my wheels for weeks trying to like build models, forecasting models and figure out, okay, like what is the demand last year? How do I, make some assumptions about what the growth is going to be for next year? I finally like turn in my spreadsheet to my boss, and my senior director goes, oh, you could have just gotten that from finance. Like they can just pull last year's numbers and then, do it in like 20 minutes. And I'm like, what? But I think it was just, the drive inside of me to be like, okay, there's this problem to be solved. I am going to achieve and I'm going to land it. I'm going to nail it. I wasn't far off from finance's numbers. Let me just tell you.
Of course you weren't.
But yeah, it was this realization of like, what? You want this for me? It's going to be wrong. Okay, I'll just make it up.
It's kind of like those trick questions that they ask during interviews. How many windows are in New York City? And you're supposed to like come up with the strategy to figure out it's not about the answer, but how you got there, which is clearly not the case in this. They needed the correct answer, but you chose the hard way. But because you're a chronic overachiever and you're delivering results, you end up landing the Doritos brand manager job, which is your dream job, because this means Super Bowl ads, Grammys, celebrities. So first off, tell us how you end up landing that job, because it wasn't just the metrics, right? And when you got there, did you feel like you finally made it?
Ooh, really great questions. So because I was on this team that ran like a portfolio, the immediate consumption portfolio, nobody really knew what I did. It was like being a master of none. And we were kind of tucked away in sales, but I was a marketer. And there's this thing that all new hires have to do at Frito-Lay, and it's called Follies. And you basically make skits. It's an offsite, and the whole new hire class makes skits. And there was one performance in particular where a colleague of mine had written a song to the tune of Ariel's A Whole New World, and she was looking for someone to sing it. And it was about some of these smaller brands like wanting to join the bigger brands. And so I volunteered to sing it. Nobody in the audience knew who I was. Maybe there were like 5 to 10 people who actually had worked with me at the time. And so I sing the song. And I remember getting the feedback, like the SVP of like the core brands was like, who is that? Like, she's really great. And so fast forward to I'm applying for the Doritos role. And the first thing that the hiring managers say to me is they're like, I loved your performance. Like, they don't even ask me a question. They were just like, that was so great, so brave of you to do. And I'm like, yeah. I mean, it wasn't hard because I had been singing for my whole life. And I guess it was just one of those things where it was like a secret talent that nobody knew. And so I attribute my singing to getting the Doritos job. Long story short. But yeah, it was a dream job. And for me, it was kind of the perfect culmination of the things that I had been working on in my career. Was these advertising campaigns and combining that with like leading a multi-billion-dollar brand. And so there was a lot of pressure in that role, but at the same time, a lot of excitement. And it was everything that you can even imagine, because I was going to the Grammys and like building out brand activations and going on shoots and meeting celebrities. It was so, so cool. And yeah, I just look back at that time and I'm like, oh, wow, how did I do that?
And it's reinforcing this need to perform, right? Not just, the singing, but also your work, because you keep getting rewarded and you keep getting pushed up. And it's great, but at the same time, it's really dangerous, because I would like to know, what is your work ethic at this point, and what did you think work-life balance was then?
Oh my gosh. So this was a typical work day for me. I'd wake up at like 6, get myself ready. By like 7:30, I'm like answering emails already. And then head to the office around 8 o'clock, bouncing from one meeting to the next, eating lunch at my desk while jamming away at as many emails as I could. And then by the end of the day, getting home, having a quick dinner, asking my husband, how's your day going? And then hopping back on the computer, again, answering emails, chugging away at work until like 10 p.m., until like my eyes glaze over and I'm like asleep. And just lather, rinse, and repeat. That was like my life, especially before I had any kids. And it was clocking in 70, 80-hour work weeks on the daily grind. And that wasn't unusual. That was actually like the normal pace of work for me. And I think part of me believed that that's what I needed to do to stand out, to be a high performer, to achieve, like, to be the best of the best, is like, I didn't want any like email unanswered. I didn't want to be the person who was slow in responding. I wanted to always go and grind really hard. And it was at the height of my job in Doritos that I end up like getting this huge piece of news, this huge piece of health news. And that shift really made me question my life and what I was doing and what was truly urgent and important. And so at the beginning of 2020, I'm probably about 6 months into my role at Doritos. So I'm walking into a Super Bowl meeting at work when I get a phone call from my doctor. And a few months prior, I had found this bump. They found it in a physical. Ultimately, they deemed it benign. So we were just going to keep an eye out on it. But I had just gotten back from a Grammys activation. So I was traveling for work and I felt that bump had gotten a little bit bigger. And so told my husband, I'm just going to get checked out. No big deal. Well, it turns out that I was pregnant. I found out that I was pregnant after getting back from that trip from work. And ultimately, like that bump had gotten bigger. So we ended up doing additional testing on the bump. And that's what the call was that I was getting from my doctor were the test results. So I'm walking into this meeting at work. It's a big meeting, not one that I can really miss. And I see my doctor calling. So I find a small conference room to the side and excuse myself. And she goes, I'm sorry, Kelly, it's breast cancer. And in that moment, my heart sinks into my stomach because I'm like, what the heck? I just found out I'm pregnant. I'm 30 years old. I have no family history of breast cancer. And now this is happening. Like, this isn't supposed to happen to a person of my, like, statistics. Like, how did I become a statistic? And so it was really shocking. I hadn't even told my parents. And so that day, I immediately leave the office and I call my parents. I have my whole family come over and I had to tell them the joyful and devastating news all in one sitting. And so it was really this huge monumental shift in my life that really made me question for the first time, like what's important? How am I gonna outwork cancer? And that was kind of the mindset I went into it.
Was work your place of comfort? And is that why, you're saying I'm going to outwork this?
Yes, I think work kind of made me feel normal, but also like being a high achiever, I guess I had this like narrative in my mind that I'm just going to be the best patient. I'm just going to do everything that the doctors are going to tell me. I'm going to keep track of all of my records. I'm going to account manage my cancer. And that's the thing is that you find out like when you go through this big life crisis that the systems aren't talking to one another. So you have to project manage your life and be the communicator between different doctors, managing your calendar I was going to doctor's appointments like multiple times a week. And this happened for several weeks on end until we ultimately came up with a treatment plan. And so shortly after getting my diagnosis, I think this was 2 weeks after, the entire world shuts down due to the pandemic. And so I am alone going to my doctor's appointments. I'm scared. And I am just running on survival mode. I can't even explain that period of time eloquently because when I'm brought back into it, I just think about how the only thing I could think of is just doing the next right thing, taking the next right step. That's how I survived it. And to know that it wasn't just me that I was fighting for, it was also my daughter. That's who was relying on me to perform.
And you did, right? And for context, this is really early in your pregnancy, right? When you get your diagnosis, you're only a few weeks pregnant, and everybody knows the first trimester is really the most volatile and the most dangerous. But you go into surgery in your first trimester to try to have the cancer removed. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so we actually wait. So I find out that I have cancer in my first trimester. We actually wait until like the first day of my second trimester to have surgery. So At 13 weeks pregnant, I'm walking into a completely empty hospital alone for surgery. There's nobody there, not even a single soul to check me in. And I remember just thinking, like, this is like a zombie apocalypse movie. It's like a ghost town in here. There were 2 coronavirus patients in the hospital at that time. So everything was very like high security, like everyone's super careful. So I have my surgery. I remember at the end when I'm waking up from recovery, the nurse puts a heart rate monitor on my belly, and I'm like holding my breath, waiting to hear my baby's heart rate. And it goes bup, 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 and 135 BPM, she says. And I breathed this huge sigh of relief because my first real duty as a mom was now complete. And that moment, it just made me realize like how precious life was, how intertwined our personal and our professional lives are. So I get back home. I had to go home that same day because there are COVID patients at the hospital. My husband, who is a filmmaker, is now my nurse who is administering all my medications. And for the first time in my entire career, I feel the sense of relief. And it's not because the cancer's out of my body. It's actually because for the first time ever, I have a legitimate excuse not to look at my work emails. And I know that's not normal, Lilo. I know that. I know that's not normal, but like for 6 weeks, I'm like, all right, I don't have to look at my work emails, and I can just relax and recover and be here. Mm-hmm. And it's just a wild realization because you would think that I would have slowed down after my cancer experience, and I didn't.
But I can relate to that because our children happened to be the exact same age. We were pregnant at the same time. We were going into the hospital zombie apocalypse at the same time. Obviously, I wasn't going through the same, medical crisis that you were going through, but it was a very lonely time. And I had reconstructive surgery after having my son, and it was the same thing. I was so excited to have 10 days where nobody could call me, but just to not have to be on the hook, like to have a valid excuse, to be looking for that valid excuse, I think is a very good sign for the both of us that we were living some pretty unhealthy, unbalanced lives.
Yeah, for sure.
And so what happens? 6 weeks later, you have your recovery, you have your excuse to not be at work, but you do go back to work, and you do go back full throttle because you're Kelly, right? You don't know how to not achieve excellence. Did cancer feel like an inconvenience to you, to your career that you were building when you got back?
When I got diagnosed with cancer, I thought it was going to be a career crusher. I thought everything that I'd worked towards, this is it. It cannot come back after this. And so because I was coming back during COVID, or we were all remote, maybe people didn't even realize that I was gone for that long, which is also not a good thing. But I kind of seamlessly integrated myself back in. And then I doubled down. Cancer lit this fire inside of me that, hey, life is too short. You got to achieve everything that you need to achieve. And I wanted to make sure that I was aggressively pursuing my goals from here on out, and end up getting promoted into another high visibility role after I have my daughter. And I was deemed cancer-free, so I'm very grateful for that. I have a beautiful, healthy daughter. But shortly after that, I get put into this really high visibility role covering, again, the entire portfolio, and a few members of the team leave. So I'm, as one does, you help out to make sure the team is staying afloat. So you're doing multiple jobs at once, wearing many hats. But I couldn't keep up. Like, I felt like the tasks on my plate were constantly piling up. I didn't know how to raise my hand for help. I just thought, I'm going to outwork this. Like I outworked cancer. And ultimately that resulted in me just being so burnt out, like anxious, depressed. I have these rashes that start to appear all over my body. And I tell my oncologist this, and he's like, that's not allergies, it's stress hives. And it was in that moment, I was like, stress hives? What could I possibly be stressed about?
What could it be? I have no idea.
I have no idea. That's strange. I realized that despite society's glorification of hustle culture and how I was rewarded because of my hard work and my dedication for so many years, that I was going to work myself back into cancer. And that realization made me make a change. And I ended up taking another role at a different organization. And so I started working at Avocados From Mexico as the director of brand marketing, again, like leading the branding efforts for the Super Bowl. So it was another high visibility role, really fun job. But I think you might be aware of where the story is going, that I didn't learn my lesson. I ended up burning myself out again. And that resulted in me traveling a bunch and getting home one night, and my 3-year-old daughter, I'm tucking her into bed, and I ask her, how can I be a better mommy? So this is a few years after, the cancer and battling that. But she says, don't leave us. And at 3 years old, I'm like stunned because of everything that we had been through and everything that I thought I was showing her of how to be an ambitious working mother who's accomplishing and achieving dreams. And that was just a reality check, because she didn't care about the accolades or the fancy job title or everything that I was doing in my corporate life. She just cared about my presence and me being a good mom.
And it's such a lucid thought too, right? It's just such a pure answer from her. Like it wasn't meant to be anything but, this is what I need right now. It's so primal.
Yeah.
But it's not easy, right? You have your daughter, you have your family, but there's also so many people relying on you at work. Was it still easy for you to leave at that point? Did you have any other signs that were telling you, maybe this isn't the right thing?
Yeah. So, I end up getting promoted at work.
As you do, because you're Kelly.
Yeah. And my team expands. My boss leaves. And so I have a more increased responsibility. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I am keeping everybody afloat. That was what was in my mindset, was I have to perform at my highest level so that everybody else can be okay. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until I started getting these headaches every single day. I would have these headaches after a long work day, and to the point where I couldn't even move my neck. We were on Zoom a lot, and I'd be on video calls all day, and I couldn't even move my neck. And this was happening for about 2 months. So I go back to my doctor, and he says, hey, given your health history, let's get it checked out just to be safe. Mm-hmm. So I'm in an MRI machine about to get my brain scanned, and they roll me back through the machine. And the guy, the technician, presses a button. He's like, hey, is everything going on okay in there? And I'm like, it's good. Aside from the fact that you're scanning my brain for cancer, I can't complain. And it was in that moment I realized this is not worth it. I am going to give myself cancer again. I am doing the exact same thing that I did at my old job. So the problem, it's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. And I knew I had to make a change. I knew that going from one job to another job was not going to be a drastic enough change. I needed to take a step back. I needed to slow myself down. And Lilo, I tell you, when I made that decision to quit my job, quitting my job was scarier than getting my cancer diagnosis.
Why?
Because it was a choice that I was making, and it wasn't just something that was happening to me. It was me deciding, like, enough is enough. I need to make a different path for myself. Mm-hmm. And everything that was wrapped up in my job and my identity and my definition of success, that was going to go away. And I felt like, am I throwing this all away because I just couldn't cut it? And that was kind of the narrative that was playing back to me, was I'm a failure. Like, this is me throwing in the towel.
Right. Because you were really good at it, right? Like, you just kept climbing. There must be something that's right about what you're doing if they keep promoting you. And that's kind of the scary part of it, is that you're rewarded for excellence, but you're also being rewarded for unnecessary sacrifice. And that's really confusing.
It is. And I think part of it too, now that I reflect back, is that I never made it seem, externally, I never made it seem hard. The challenges were all internally. It was me making the decision of whether or not to go on this work trip, knowing that I'm going to miss a recital, or am I going to, like, take this promotion knowing that I am going to be reporting into a CEO now. And there were a lot of me fighting my own ego, because my ego was taught that, like, achievement was survival. And if I quit, it means I'm failing, and failure means we're not going to survive. And I think it was having to rewire that in my brain, because nobody knew that I was struggling so much. Everything was shiny on the outside.
Yeah. But you do quit.
I did quit. Yeah.
And what happens after that?
I ended up taking some time off. So I had a plan. I was going to take 6 months off. My husband and I agreed, like, okay, 6 months off, don't do anything. Then you'll go back into the gauntlet and find another job that works for you. And about 3 months into my time off, I had this realization that if I just keep doing the same thing that I'm doing, I'm going to keep getting the same results. And I made myself a list of 5 goals during my time off. First, I wanted to redefine my identity outside of my work. The second was I wanted to be a present parent and partner. Third was I wanted to take care of my health. Fourth was to build a company called Career Slay. And fifth was to travel. So Career Slay started out as a podcast. I started to think back through what were the experiences in my job and in my career that I enjoyed the most. And it came back to these conversations that I was having on my podcast. I interviewed people who loved what they did, and you could just tell there was this joy about them, and they radiated with purpose and fulfillment and meaning. And I wanted that for myself. And I thought back, how can I do that every day? How can I be a podcast host professionally? And so what that naturally led me into was my best friend was looking for executive coaching programs. She invited me to go to a certification program. So I went. I ended up getting certified to be an executive coach. And that's kind of the start of, like, building Career Slay, not just into a brand, but into a business. And I started helping people courageously navigate their careers and becoming the fearless leaders they were meant to be. And it gave me so much more purpose in my job, because I had all of this corporate experience. I didn't want that to go to waste, but I also knew that, like, going back into that environment, for me, it wasn't the most healthy environment, because I still wasn't fully healed from everything. But how can I help people create more thriving cultures, better environments, and it was by coaching other leaders. And I think that's where now I look back at my story and everything that happened, and it all happened for a reason.
And you had a ton of medical signs that were telling you, hey, girl, maybe we should change. But you had a huge medical sign when you finally did quit that validated that, yes, you made the right decision. What was that?
So 5 weeks after I left my corporate job, my Apple Watch pinged me. And it said, your resting heart rate is trending lower. So, of course, I go to Google and I'm like, does this mean I'm dying? And it's actually a good thing. You want a low resting heart rate because it means like your heart doesn't have to work as hard. And so when I showed the results to my oncologists and my doctors, they were floored. They were like, there is nothing that we could have given you or done for you to get these results. You literally freed your body from the weight of stress. Mm-hmm. And my body responded so beautifully to it. And so now I look back and I'm like, I was struggling so much when I made the decision to quit because I was like, I am throwing away everything. And there were financial implications too, because, you know, at the time I was the breadwinner in my family. My family was on my health insurance. My biggest fear was I didn't want to leave my job and not have the proper healthcare insurance in case cancer came back or there was a recurrence or something happened. And so, like, it wasn't just, hey, just find a new job. Like, just, you know, there was a lot baked into that decision to where the fear really felt like, oh my gosh, if you do this, like, you're really screwing yourself over. But seeing that data point was validation that, like, hey, you got to take care of yourself first. And when you start to do that, everything else changes. Like when you start to invest in your health and pour into your self-care, then you're able to show up better for everyone else who's relying on you. You're able to perform better
Right.
at the end of the day.
It's telling you, Kelly, you're not dying. You're actually, maybe for the first time, really living, right? Like you're calm for the first time ever.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the other, data points is I lowered my cholesterol by like 19 points. I lost 10 pounds. I am getting better sleep. I am exercising every day. And it's for the first time ever, I'm prioritizing my health over everything else. And it's not an excuse. It's not a like, hey, you have cancer, now you have to prioritize your health. It's now putting that in the driver's seat so that I can show up for the other parts of my life fully and wholly.
Mm-hmm. And you're still an achiever. I think now maybe you've just learned how to temper that a little bit more, because I recently attended a conference and one of the speakers had us take the Enneagram test. And I've done MBTI multiple times, True Colors, all these other tests before, but this was the first time that I did the Enneagram test. Mm-hmm. And the speaker described it as nature versus nurture. MBTI is how you present, but Enneagram is like the intrinsic qualities that you have. And so not surprising at all, I am a type 3, which is the achiever, and you are too.
Yeah, I am.
We're people driven by success, right? And the need to feel valuable. And we are really terrified of feeling worthless. There is a concern for achievers because we become so focused on success that we tend to lose sight of our own values. So I want to know, Kelly, what is your truth now?
So my truth now is that there's a difference between quitting and giving up. Mm-hmm. Giving up means that you're resigning to failure. But quitting is actually taking back your power. Quitting is saying, I'm stopping from putting myself in environments that no longer serve me, from doing things that are harming me. Quitting is pivoting at this point, because you were making a conscious effort to redirect your life. And so the way that I define success today is no longer achievement or status or money or title. It is having the freedom and the flexibility to do work that I truly love and to do work that is purposeful and meaningful. And I find that every single day through coaching and through speaking and through podcasting and by telling my story so that people who may relate to being a high achiever or a high performer can say that you don't have to wait until you get a cancer diagnosis or stress hives or even have a brain MRI to have that realization that you get to choose your own path, that you get to choose things that align with your values. So yeah, for me, that's the reframe. Quitting is no longer failure. It's my power.
And we've had a lot of conversations about our relationship with ambition and this attempted balance between work life, right? Being a mother, being present, and still being able to fulfill our own personal desires of achievement, because that's not something that's just going to leave. But I really believe that ambition is seasonal. Your goals are shifting, priorities are changing, and you deliver speeches that talk about alignment. So how do you now align ambition, success, and failure? And how do you tell your audiences how to do that?
So I think about alignment in the sense of, think of it like a compass. Northeast, southwest, right? So north is really aligning to your North Star. And this is the big vision that you have for your life. Like, what do you want your life to look like in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years? And I know there's a lot of, skepticism about planning that far out because there are macroeconomic factors that will happen. But there's something to be said about really creating that vision for yourself and what you can control. I remember when I took a career exam, it was like matching you to different types of careers back when I was in business school. The number one career that was on there was coaching and mentoring. And I'm like, what? I should have just listened to this. So it's like, listen to yourself because you have that gut, that intuition. So set that vision for yourself. The second thing is East. So East is really about energy. What are you passionate about? And this is really tapping into the passions that energize you and that excite you, because you're naturally going to get energy from things that intrinsically you're interested in and things that motivate you. So align with your passions. And then when we think about South, so South is about sense of self, like it's digging deep into your soul, right? And so this is about understanding your values. What are the values that you care about most that become the priorities for the rest of your life? So for me, that's my values of freedom and flexibility, of family, of really being able to find creativity and generosity in the things that I do. So that's South. And then finally, it's West. So West is thinking about your why, and that is tying back to your purpose. So when we think about purpose, it's how am I impacting others beyond myself? How are the things that I'm doing in my work or in my life having greater impact on the world around me? And it doesn't have to be, I think a lot of people get intimidated by purpose because they think, oh, I have to go change the world or whatnot. Purpose is really defining that deeper sense of why. If you understand what is driving you and what's motivating you, I think that can really be a very poignant way to drive your career. And so having alignment with those four things, and I think it gives you a better sense of that internal compass of, is this for me or is this not for me? And I've found that it really helped me find my own path and define that for the future.
And to the seventh grader inside of all of us that really wants to quit piano and stop performing for others and who believed that quitting was failing, what do you tell her?
Continue finding your own path and living your most authentic life, because that's the only way you're going to truly find happiness.
I love that. So Kelly, I want to thank you for showing us that quitting isn't failing. Sometimes it's pivoting, and sometimes not quitting is actually the real failure. Because your journey as a kid who walked away from that piano to the woman who walked away from the corner office teaches us that just because we can do something, just because we're good at it, it doesn't mean that we need to keep doing it. So here's to knowing when to stay, knowing when to go, and having the courage to choose ourselves, because quitting isn't failure. It's pivoting towards our priorities. And if you want to learn more about Kelly, listen to her podcast, Career Slay, and learn how to slay the fear in your career, or book a discovery call with her at careerslay.com. For all of the links and resources mentioned today, visit liesmyego.com or check out our show notes. And as always, if you're loving the podcast, leave us 5 stars wherever you listen. And if you're a true fan, leave a written review on Apple Podcasts. Kelly, thank you for sharing your story today and being here. And I think people are going to be really inspired by your journey.
Thank you, Lilo. You're a fantastic interviewer, and I love your podcast. And I know so many people are going to be impacted by the podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks.